Free your mind now. Be part of People's Pan-African Parliament, the Pan-African Pyramid Debate with your speaker, Andrew Irumba Katusabe.
Welcome aboard, welcome to another edition of the Pan-African Pyramid Show here at Fairway Hotel. My name is Andrew Irumba Katusabe, your speaker as usual, and tonight we are discussing how prepared is Uganda's and Africa for the fourth industrial revolution. We all know that there has been first, second, third, and now we're in the fourth industrial revolution. But how ready, how prepared is Africa to partake of the advantages of that revolution? The fourth industrial revolution is the trend towards automation and data exchange in manufacturing technologies and processes, which include cyber physical systems or CPS, Internet of Things, IoT, Industrial Internet of Things, cloud computing, cognitive computing, and artificial intelligence. A part of this phase of industrial change is the training of the technologies like artificial intelligence, gene editing, to advanced robotics that actually blur the lines between the physical, digital, and the biological worlds. The fourth industrial revolution, or VIR, or the Industrial 4, conceptualizes a rapid change to technology, industries, and societal patterns and processes in the 21st century due to the increasing interconnectivity and smart automation. The fourth industrial revolution, ladies and gentlemen, was actually first introduced by a team of scientists developing a high-tech strategy for the German government. Klaus Schwab, the executive chairman of the World Economic Forum, WEF, introduced the phrase to a wider audience in 2015 article published by Foreign Affairs, Mastering the Fourth Industrial Revolution. It was the 2016 theme of the World Economic Forum annual meeting in Davos, Klosters, Switzerland. On 10th October 2016, the forum announced the opening of its Center for the Fourth Industrial Revolution in San Francisco. This was also subject and title of Schwab's 2016 book. Schwab includes in this fourth era technologies that combine hardware, software, and biological, and emphasizes advances in communication and connectivity. Schwab actually expects this era to be marked by breakthrough in emerging technologies in fields such as robotics, artificial intelligence, nanotechnology, quantum computing, biotechnology, the Internet of Things, the Industrial Internet of Things, decentralized consensus, fifth generation wireless technologies, 3D printing, and fully autonomous vehicles. The fourth industrial revolution marks the beginning of the imagination age. Now, Professor Evaristo Benyera, an associate professor of African politics at the University of South Africa, argues in his book titled The Fourth Industrial Revolution and Recolonization of Africa, released in 2021, he argues that the process of accelerated automation of traditional manufacturing and industrial practices via digital technology will serve to further marginalize Africa within the international community. The author argues that the looting of Africa that started with human capital and the natural resources now continues unabated via data and digital resources looting, developing on the notion of coloniality of data. The fourth industrial revolution is postulated as the final phase, which will conclude Africa's peregrination towards recolonization. Global cartels, networks of coloniality, and tech multinational corporations have actually turned big data into capital, which is largely unregulated or poorly regulated in Africa, as the continent lacks the strong institutions necessary to regulate the mining of data. Written from a colonial perspective, Professor Benyera employs three analytical pillars of coloniality of power, knowledge, and the being. All the slaves, he writes, past, present, and future, and those slaves who actually don't know that they are slaves, as the fourth industrial revolution consolidates and takes effect, Humanity and other forms of life are undergoing irresistible, irreversible, and universal social, economic, and legal transformation based on the massive appropriation of social life through data extraction. In the fourth industrial revolution, capitalism took a new turn, away from focusing on materials and goods towards services. Materials and services. The 4IR is actually essentially a services revolution brought about the merging of nanotechnology, biotechnology, information communication technology, ICT, among others, in the process, blurring the traditional boundaries between the physical, the digital, and the biological worlds. This resulted in new ways of thinking and doing, aided by the vast amounts of information and data harvested from people's daily lives, hence the Internet of Things, among many technology-enabled services. In the 4IR, the evolution of episteme has taken another turn, and its relation to being which once again excluded the black people, broadly defined, with a history of exclusion, slavery, colonialism, and perpetual denial into personhood. Black people are still struggling to be part of the thinking being and always grapple with how to enter the realm of knowledge production. Stated differently, black people, the majority of them African, lack the right to rights. The fourth industrial revolution will undoubtedly complicate the case for the black people to enter and be accepted into the realm of humanity. In the fourth industrial revolution, the thinking and cognitive space as a new entrance, transhumans, robo-humans, and other forms of enhanced humanity who occupy an ontological position higher than that of black people. The fourth industrial revolution, therefore, ladies and gentlemen, if Africa is not well prepared, it can be another sad moment in the life of black people as they slide lower and lower on the ontological ladder, whose apex is occupied by the white Caucasian males and bottom is occupied by the black women. Knowledge production is shifting from the human being towards online entities that are now playing the role of cognitive thinking, imagination, and creativity. Intelligence is now artificial, and IA is now responsible for the creation of a new reality to which we all belong to. Ladies and gentlemen, who are those responsible for creating this new reality? Who are the new philosopher kings? The new philosopher kings are the emerging tech oligarchy that is replacing the political oligarchy. They own and control big data, artificial intelligence, online communities, and the online economy. They harvest data, process it, commodify, and hence make data a capital. Like all forms of capital, data extraction is not only unethical, but brutal and unforgiving. Data is capital, the new gold and oil. Like oil and gold before it, data is power, and like all forms of power, it is deployable in political spaces in order to predetermine, influence, and preempt political decisions. Indeed, democracy and many other political processes, this in turn, ladies and gentlemen, will result in the entrenchment of coloniality, especially in Africa, where there are weak accountability institutions and unethical and unjust leadership. So I ask, the big question is, how prepared is Uganda and Africa for the fourth industrial revolution?
Welcome myself to the Pan-African Pyramid, and I also want to welcome all of you Pan-Africans that have gathered today, this evening, to share and find out if Africa and Uganda, we are ready for the fourth industrial revolution. My name is Mike Katongole. I am a young person in Africa, an entrepreneur. I serve in government. I'm a member of the National Council for Higher Education. I am a Pan-African and a leader at one point.
I also remember you were a former president of Mbarara University.
I am also a former guild president of Mbarara University during my days of study. And I have found potential in Africa that we can be ready for the fourth industrial revolution. And these efforts of readiness are all embedded in all generations. The old ones, the young ones, working together towards a common agenda for Africa. I would like to, because the context of the 4.0 industrial revolution is not a context that generated from Africa, I wish to inspire ourselves a bit to what actually this revolution is looking at. Those who have had an experience with the mythological gods, there is a perspective that at one point in the years 2100, the human being, if you asked the descendants of a human species, then we shall be us looking at them as the gods of mythology. Today, if our ancestors came back, they would look at us as wizards, sorcerers, magicians, because we shall show them that we can actually communicate on magic mirrors, and those are smartphones. They will say, wow, these are magicians. Today, if our ancestors came back, they will call us that we can actually fly on flying saucers. You know, some of you come from villages where it is still believed that someone can fly on the broom.
You've seen some fly on the brooms in the movie.
Thank you very much. I can assure you that if our ancestors came today and found you flying in aeroplanes, they would confidently say that these are flying saucers. That's how we shall be looking at our descendants in the years 2100s. They will be gods of mythology. The first god is Venus. He had a perfect body and immortal. In the years far from now, I can confidently tell you as a scientist, someone who is a fellow in Makerere University of Bioinformatics, that in the future, we are going to have an immortal human being. Immortal. And not only talking about the physical immortality, but also talking about digital immortality.
Immortal human being, somebody that will not die.
You heard me. It is going to be possible in the future to represent a human being from an existing form. The carbon and hydrogens, we are going to represent a human being in other different physical forms, for example, of elements like silicon. It is going to be possible. Already, we have seen advances in medicine that we are already identifying over 60 genes that control aging. That once we manipulate them, actually you can reverse aging.
The president now comes back to 25 years.
You had me right.
Where would we be now?
I can tell you that if we have already now 60 genes, and I tell you as a scientist, what will happen? Don't you think in the years 3100 we shall have millions of genes? They can add a human species, the Homo sapien, close to 250 years once exploited. Then those people shall be Venus. Because Venus was a perfect body and immortal. You have seen people today can put prosthetics. When the World Cup in Brazil was starting, you might not have noticed the science. There's a gentleman who kicked the first ball. He was a paraplegic and he had got an accident that all his neural network was down. an artificial skeleton that was put on him enabled, he only had the brain active, but the artificial full skeleton enabled him to move and kick that first world ball. And that was phenomenal that scientists wanted to express it on the World Cup to show you the power of a human species. In the descendants to come, we shall have powers of Apollo. Apollo is god of the sun. Apollo. We shall have power to recreate the sun on this earth safely. We shall produce an enormous amount of energy that will power all our energy needs. Those who follow international proceedings, you've realized that last week we have succeeded to successfully carry out a fusion reaction in a fusion in southern France, in a fusion reactor in southern France. That
fusion reaction, what do you mean? For us who are not scientists.
For example, in the 50 years ago, 100 years ago in the World War, 50 years ago in the World War, human beings were able to get an atom and defy the Daltonian theory that the atom is the smallest indivisible particle. But they break it up and created the atomic bomb. So we know the atom is not the smallest indivisible particle. Inside the atom, there are subatomic elements that actually, when you bring them together at high speed, they can hit themselves and burst and create an enormous amount of energy. And that energy can be used to harness human power and exploit this planet more. When that happens, that we can recreate the power of the sun. Already, I'm telling you that fusion reaction has power to give us energy that is equivalent to that of the sun. We shall be like gods of, a god of mythology called Apollo. There is another god called Zeus. Zeus was the father of
where do these gods live and where did we find this?
That is Greek mythology. Zeus,
I don't know what to put.
Zeus, and I can tell you, when I was coming here, they told me there is a God, so I speak carefully. And I'm sure there's a God in this room, so I speak carefully. Zeus was the father of gods. He would think and anything happened. I can tell you in the years, not more than 4 decades from now, we shall think and stuff will happen.
4 decades now, those are 40 years.
In the 4.0 industrial revolution, I brought that nearer because it is already happening. We have technology called the brain-machine interface or computer-brain interface, where in the future we are not going to transfer words and statements. We are going to send feelings, emotions. We are going to send sadness, and we are going to communicate telepathically. We are just going to sit down, keep quiet, and send an emotion to someone across the sea. And that is the 4.0 industrial revolution. And it is already happening. I can tell you that as a scientist confidently, so far we have been able to move a memory from one mouse to the other. We have also done so in monkeys. Already, the Darwin of our generation has already transferred memories from monkeys to computers stored and back to another monkey. So if we can transfer it locally, then we can also transfer it over the internet. And the next generation of internet is called BrainNet.
BrainNet.
So if you are thinking of exploring the internet, the future is the BrainNet, where the brains are going to send messages. When we become that, we shall become Zeus, because we shall think and anything will happen.
We shall become
the god of mythology called Zeus.
Where are you finding these guys? Where are they?
There is another god called Mercury.
Mercury.
Mercury was the god of speed. Mercury would move 400 kilometers in just a second. And I can tell you, in the years around 110,000, humans are going to be moving at supersonic speed, and we shall achieve teleportation capacities, things that you have seen in movies, in science fiction. Today, the reason why the technologies of the supersonic jets failed, it was because of the sonic boom. Those who have heard of the sonic boom. Today, at Google, engineers have come together and innovated computers that run on a technology of a different dynamics of physics called quantum physics.
Quantum physics, yes.
The quantum physics says, quantum physics has a basic principle that I can be here and here at the same time. Therefore, I can be, if I harness that principle, I can be at Mars and on Earth at the same time. And that brings in another theory of a great thinker, Albert Einstein, the theory of relativity, the theory of parallel universes. It is going to be possible that we are going to solve the limitations of matter towards how it responds to resistance, and we improve our speeds. You have heard of the China building a railway transport that moves at a supersonic speed. I am telling you that once we achieve that, we shall be a god known as Mercury. I want to tell you the last god. I started with taking you to the future, far future. The last god is called Pegasus. Pegasus was a god who was half a horse and half a human.
Half what?
A human being and half a horse. Now, that sounds unfamiliar. Why would you have a human being who is like a horse? So I can tell you, in the future, we are going to have new species, new creatures that you have never seen. Human beings have capacity today to become gods, to create new species, new animals, new plants, new fungi that you have never seen. Actually today, there is an animal that got extinct. We call it a mammoth. We have already isolated the full genomic transcript of a mammoth. And already a lot of billions of dollars are going into the research of a mammoth. We want to recreate the mammoth, bring it back to life. Already we have a gene of an extinct human being known as a Neanderthal. We, the Homo sapiens, come from a genetic line of a Neanderthal. And we can ably, in a few decades, bring back a Neanderthal. Because human beings have figured out the first standard where we come from, our known so far. And when I use the word so far, in science, we don't have knowledge, expressed knowledge. We always have knowledge as of then. Anytime knowledge changes. So we black people, it is, when you trace our genetic origin, there is another genetic root called the Neanderthal. So, but so far the gene we have isolated is that of a Neanderthal. And when we get ability, there is a tool we use in genetic engineering called the CRISPR-Cas9. It has ability to cut one genetic piece and fix it in another genetic piece, and I can co-create a completely new organism. So if we get that ability, and I can tell you, scientists have created the first artificially made cellular structure already. We shall become a god known as Pegasus, and we shall be able to change life into different forms. Why I brought to you the theory of the gods of mythology is that in the future, human beings, we are going to have extreme power, just like the gods of mythology. And that power, once we don't handle it very well and commit the same mistakes the gods of mythology created, they had a lot of trickery among themselves and a lot of pride. And the Greek mythology tells you that those two things, trickstery, pride, and a lot of ignorance, is what led to the collapse of the gods of mythology. At the helm of every civilization, there is always an element of ignorance that can easily lead to the collapse of that civilization. And in every revolution or evolution, there is always errors. When I take you the microorganism one, when a virus or a bacteria is evolving, every time it mutates, it can change shape, but it leaves behind an enormous amount of errors. And if it does not check those errors, it reaches what we call a genetic knock. It dies spontaneously.
It knocks itself.
It knocks itself.
Okay.
So
you've spoken a lot of is it physics, chemistry, science? Can we now combine all that and focus on how ready, how prepared is Africa?
I know in your head you are like, shall we Africans be connected to all that? Because the truth is, we are not yet, as the previous speakers have said, even going through the first, the second, the third,
And now going for the fourth.
and now we're in the fourth. And already there are debates of the fifth. People are saying, haven't we had the fifth match with the fourth without our knowledge? So don't we say this is the fifth? The fifth is what people will refer to as singularity. I came up with a well-thought strategy that I thought if we brainstormed about and connect it with regards to the challenge I've given you for the future, might be, and I want to know, I don't want to guarantee on behalf of all Africans. I say maybe we shall integrate ourselves into
The fourth industrial
the
revolution.
fourth industrial revolution. And the first
Maybe.
advantage, and I'm using it carefully. I know the kind of Africans I'm talking about. Maybe we shall. And I'm very optimistic about it. The first one, and the strategy is called the vertically integrated industrial approach.
Vertically integrated industrial approach.
The reason why I believe we need to adopt a vertically integrated industrial approach, because Africa, we cannot go back to the first to build the steam engine. Neither can we move faster
To the fourth.
to the fourth. The manufacture of this LCD screen is different. The manufacturer of the chip that powers the computer is different. The semiconductor manufacturer.
Even the screen.
The manufacturer of the motherboard is different. The manufacturer of the battery is different. And those are all people in the value chain. But we call them manufacturers, and you find that, for example, a manufacturer in this value chain only earns 2% of the value. Every manufacturer earns 2%. Now the biggest other revenue goes to the downstream, the one who sells this in Uganda. Because we will come and add the 30%. So, but the one in the downstream has not added value. Now, all industries that are leading the 4.0 industrial revolution are concentrating on the upstream.
Upstream.
The upstream, that's where we create knowledge. I can give you an example of a Ugandan. There is a Ugandan in a company in America called Boeing. A boy born in Uganda. Who designed?
I wanted to summarize.
Thank you. Who designed the telephone macra of the one of the Boeing airplane in a different architecture? And just on paper, his architecture, he has royalty rights on that design because he contributed with a group of another team to design that kind of work. Now, why I'm saying upstream capacity, you must concentrate on human capital, knowledge creation, intellectuality of competing in that industry, rather than you concentrating on opening up a factory that, for example, assembles mobile phones. Because you are just going to reproduce. Whenever, if your industry is just to reproduce, then your industry only benefits 2%. The next area we have to benefit from, if you might allow me, is evolution errors. Now this is very important. Okay. Every evolution has errors, and the fourth industrial revolution have had a major error of lack of environmental sustainability. In Africa, we are well positioned. We have not spoiled our environment. We still have all what it takes to correct the error of the 4.0 industrial revolution. We must now think of innovating around correcting errors of the revolution.
Thank you.
The third one and the fourth one is universal numbers and God humanization. Universal numbers, I no longer as a Pan-African want to associate with an African who says we want to develop a solution for Africa. I want all of you to say we are going to develop a solution for the globe, for the planet, for the universe.
For the world.
Because if you cannot colonize England, then you cannot earn from England.
Yes. Oh, that's why they are colonizing us here.
So you must have a lot, your solution must be well driven to universal, and I use the word universal, that you must build to impact the universe, not to impact Africa.
So the reason they are colonizing us is to
all startup CEOs, when you go to Europe, you find them saying on TVs, we want to build solutions for Africa. I rarely hear Africans saying we want to build solutions for America. Build solutions for the whole world. It is a way of competing against you if they always tell you that develop what works in your area. I can tell you that states, nations, communities become rich by external currency exchange. You cannot become rich by only transacting your 20,000 that you have there
around your community.
You must transact both foreign. This even talks to the normal barter trade that we do. You cannot drink milk alone if you're a herdsman, but you need actually to give out milk as you get something from a peasant. So advise startups in Africa to start thinking, impacting globally. I know global challenges are a bit complex, but the moment you start solving complex challenges, then you have ability to become a god in mythology.
Thank you so much. You have finished on a very good note.
The last one is god humanization. That is important because I heard there is a god here.
That one was created by you.
And it is last. I promise you. Every African must strive to becoming a god. A god is someone who believes that they can create and they can speak and things happen.
The way Uganda does.
Go back and think, how do we change this to this? And the moment you start thinking of how do we change this to this for advancement of humanity, you have become a god. But when you go back and you sit and they tell you that God did this, so for you come every day and follow, then
come and pray. Come and pray.
Then you are a sheep.
Then, okay. The comrade here says, then you are a sheep. A sheep. Now, for the 4.0 industrial revolution to thrive, if every African became a god of himself, and you worship yourself, you believe in yourself, then it is very likely that you are going to create for the whole world. I thank you.
In the last 12 years, a very powerful speaker I have heard speak is Mr. Katongole Mike. I am very privileged and glad to have met you. You are the power just told you who. This man is your very contemporary.
I also feel that you need to give equally the same accolade to Mr. Uhuru, who started this debate.
Absolutely.
Yes.
But the rule of 2012 Today he was more of a businessman. He was speaking numbers. That, Maisha Katongo spoke what everyone is going to really admire when they watch this NBS show. And so I like to dwell on the fundamentals, and so we'll start to build and try to align what Mike Katongo was saying. Ladies and gentlemen, first things first, there's always been a very serious question. The question has always been, do we go back to reinventing the wheel? Now that everyone comes to tell you, like Professor Kwesiga was here, and you're saying, we missed 1, 2, 3, 4. The most difficult scientific questions in the schools of science and technology is, do we go back to reinventing the wheel? And the answer has been, we don't need to. I was telling my colleague Uhuru there that we need to do 3 things. Government has only 3 roles. One is called education, the other is called accessible financing, the other is called a conducive atmosphere. The American dream which you hear is just a conducive atmosphere. Give people, support people, and let them provide. Then the manifestation of Katongo saying people to be goals to create will happen. Others will dissect themselves to the first revolution, others will go to the second, others to the third, to the fifth, and to the fourth. That is what only government needs to do. You have to look things at a scientific point of view and say, what is really lacking there? They fix that. For example, there are so many young people here who have startups. I've met so many frustrated in startup hubs, but they tell you, if I had 100 million today, I can do wonder. If I had 50, but is that 50 million accessible? The government is also in a hard situation because much of this money is already borrowed. It's an interest rate to service other critical things. Infrastructure, we don't have roads. You want to reach in a hub if that road is full of potholes. So we are in a struggle, but let me go to this. Mr. Speaker, the fourth revolution in science is called the electronic revolution. And this electronic revolution has 4 components. One is called the hardware. So the hardware deals with that computer which is on your desk. It's a good example. This camera, which this man is using, that's the hardware. Everything that is tangible, this television, this microphone, that is the hardware. So you have to have the science of now who goes to the mines, because in science, in physics, they have one principle that says without silicon and germanium, there will be no world of electronics. Now quantum added. But originally, it was silicon and germanium. Now, before you go to this, you have the hardware. The next is the software. I asked my friend Uhuru, Maisha Pay, did you code Maisha Pay from Uganda? I said, yes, I have Ugandan engineers. They made Maisha Pay. Maisha Pay can transact money globally. Not so. You can send money to America, send money to Nigeria, send money to Australia, everywhere. It was made here. So Uhuru had to fit himself in the software, second component. The third one is called transmission.
So Uhuru himself belongs to the fourth industrial revolution.
Absolutely, he's
already there.
Yeah, he just picked a segment
of
software. So his software has to be downloaded on a hardware. The hardware is the phone, the laptop. So somebody has to make the computer, has to make the phone. Uhuru has to make the software program. Now another person is helping Uhuru with the transmission. That is MTN and other companies that provide data, internet, for somebody to have data to access Uhuru's platform
and download it.
and run money across. So somebody is in the transmission. Then there is the last bit where we're all lacking. I think for the first, second and third, transmission and software, but most of the software we are there. But in the 3, I would say I've not done a good presentation to plan to be able to show numbers like Uhuru did, but I think his numbers would assist us. In hardware, Africa, we are not yet there. We are hardly manufacturing hardware devices. All these devices are coming from either China, India, or Europe. We are doing most of importation. In software, we are already there. We have engineers, software engineers, and they are coding, they are making programs, and these programs are working. Number 3, transmission. We have less of our companies. These companies are foreign. But then, we don't own them, so we are not conquering anybody. We are not in that segment. Now, the last one is where it's called control. The control is hosting. And recently, I want to commend the government of Uganda in the part that I'm going to talk about next, where they got young engineers, sent them to Japan, and they were able to build our first space station. And it was set in space.
Yes.
So the space station, those space stations, their job is to host. They control. So the transmission is done through various receivers and transmitters. So there must be a hosting. Now, on all these web technologies that you've been hearing in internet, most of the things have been hosted in the United States of America. That's where the databases are. All these emails you send to your friends and so what and the messages, they have to go to the backup. Meaning those guys, their security can access anything, but our security may not easily access anything. So hosting is a very big component, and that also goes to building the hardware of the hosting. So as we seek to work on a model, we look at the fourth industrial revolution from the other aspects. So just to say, I also didn't borrow the internet kind of presentation that kind of segments. I used the old model. The industrial revolution, the first one, of course, was the steam engine. The next one was electricity. Because without electricity, this is what has been studied in Uganda. Without electricity, you cannot do manufacturing.
Yes.
So what comes first?
Because that's the power.
Exactly.
That's the engine.
So we ran to do, government had run to produce and generate electricity for us to step into manufacturing. Because now the manufacturing is not the old way. You're not going to go to the workshops of the old model, but you're now going to buy machines and manufacture. Then the fourth one now is the electronic manufacturing. Because the third one on manufacturing is where the Maxwell invented the conveyor belt system. That thing where you go, for example, a beer company or a beverage company has it where you go see many bottles rotating at the same time, something putting in liquid, packing, making the bottle. That kind of mass production that was being spoken about is that how can you produce for 1 billion people in 1 month? You have to have this kind of stuff. So ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Speaker, sir, if you allow me, in a very few times, 2 things to conclude. One is called what do we need? I've spoken this year, I continue to speak about the structuring of our education. Recently, the other countries came up with a model and they told Uganda, you have the, I'm glad that Mike Katongo is on the Higher Education, Council for Higher Education. They brought that, for us to fit in this world, we need to do STEM. Now, about 2 weeks ago, they went to review STEM, that STEM has failed. STEM is science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. That's what they were encouraging government to go on. But let me tell you, if you do not know, that man, when he started to speak, I immediately saw that he knows chemistry. He's a very good chemist.
Mr. Wood.
Both.
And Mr. Of course.
Chemistry. Without reducing chemistry from nursery school. Chemistry first, physics, mathematics. If you want to fit in this industrial revolution. Those are key to learning, to singing them.
Chemistry,
Physics
and mathematics.
They must be understood from kindergarten. Like somebody understands them so well from kindergarten. The other one is the chemistry, biology, physics. Now that one could be for doctors and other medics. Then economics, mathematics, and agriculture. Those could be something we could phase up. But then these additionals, history, culture, languages, wellness, and biblical studies, those can be optional subjects added on. That means people study them as a storytelling moments. Whether you have them or don't have them, you can, and the country can progress. Yeah. So, Mr. Speaker, and the audience that is listening, and also, hold on, just a second, I have 8 minutes. But the history, for example, I am talking about, I taught African history to myself, and I'm a very good scholar of Nyakitara dialect and its history. I've learned those myself. I've read it in schools and other forums. But just to say, Mr. Speaker, like I would say, that for us as a country to be able to be there after this education system, we need to go for science and engineering. Then we have to empower startups for tech innovations. And the last one is the technology exchange, which by evidence brought us the new satellite that our team was able to build from South Korea. So after you have studied, after you have made startups, because remember, the men that built America, it is entrepreneurs who build the next world that you want. After you have taught them, they have to come in some kind of structure. But that structure, they have also to match some kind of exchange program between those who have studied in China and Japan. I think all of you, every scientist and engineer is very conversed with how Japan stole energy. For us in the slave trade, we stole nothing other than staying there. For them, they would draw these small signs and papa in their language that made a confusion for those people to think they were also the Enigma kind of machine that would send calls. And that's the comrade and Mr. Speaker and all the audience. This man has told you facts, and I want to conclude. With affirming these facts. He has told the facts of the God humanization. The God humanization is the greatest mystery of one of the societies in the world that I may not be able here to speak in the podium. Only that their context of study is kept within their race. And these things are also embedded in the Bible. If you believe them where Jesus told the Jews that, haven't you written in your Torah and your laws that you are gods? If you go into this, the God mythologies, you start to discover, in physics there is a special subject that is called metaphysics and astrophysics. The astrophysics and metaphysics looks at the study of the universe. Each of these planets is controlled by some form of power. And in other, in other religious doctrines of other Eastern nations, they have it, the power of meditation. I remember there is a time back about 20 years, I went and invested my energies and studied into this field. And I wanted to know more and study about Confucianism, the Confucian theory, and its practices. And then it had funny practices that would make a man meditate and tap into a world of other power. But because of my faith, I got scared. Because I said, oh, what if? Because this man, Jackie Chan, Jet Li, scared us. He made a quotation that is quite scary. He said, well, that man has the ability to change his state of matter. Is that you can amplify yourself, you change your state of matter, you come from this solid form, and you become like gaseous, and then you move, and you find yourself, what exactly I was saying? You move in this state of matter, and you go and you step down in where? In Nairobi City. So, this material is a little bit scary. How do I transfer from solid? I am lifted up by some power of meditation. I move and I am in Nairobi. Then I am lifted up. I move and in South Africa. And in the morning I am back in Kampala. But just to say, there is a lot to learn where we talked about co-creation, innovation, home and genetics. All what we need to concentrate is that we have been in a phase where we do not pay attention to detail. So let us pay attention to details of everything we read everywhere. Otherwise, there is still a lot to discover. Thank
you so much.
The reason why at high learning institutions we produce graduates with papers but without knowledge. So because of the quality of lecturers we have, some guys speak as if they are in mass. They don't match with the audience. And that one reduces the teaching levels. And I don't think these ones have understood what the speakers were saying here.
Yeah.
Yes, and I'm going to elaborate on that. But let us first go through what the topic is. Now, people are talking about industrial revolution. and giving years back. But we want to look at Africa in those years. What happened? Because they are not mentioning that. Talk about Africa in 1930s. How was it looking like? Talk about Africa in 1895. How was it looking like? Because if you read and understand through research, the whole of the globe is talking about Africa as those days were called dark ages. There was no serious activity. People, that's why some people are saying Stone Age. So the evolution of industrial development did not begin in the 60s and 50s when Africa got independence. Africa was interrupted by so many things, and that's why they call it the Dark Ages, including slave trade, colonialism, wars. That's why it's not mentioned. In all these revolutionary, you are talking about first, second,
And
third. But now, Mr. Speaker, sir, I just want quickly to go what I was trying to say here. You are saying you were in a fourth revolution. Now we want to give the comparison. We are in the internet era. How many Africans are using internet for business purposes? Because those ones are some of the benchmarks to evaluate how many people are involved and are part of the revolution. Or we just have a small population that is matching with the rest of the world, when the rest actually, as the Professor Ebre said, many of Africans are in that so-called development, subsistence farming. Now, if you look at, when you are talking about science, is it inclusive or exclusive? Because you see now, what is happening in China, for you are talking about universities. And I remember my friend was talking about changing the teaching, you call it syllabus. Now, what China is concentrating on, actually some people cannot even speak English. They are concentrating on technical institutions, technical education. If I was the head of state in Uganda, I would turn Katwe into a university. Because you see, these are serious issues. And now, when for instance, you have some little training to Katwe, they get to know some of these softwares. They get to know how to use these raw materials, turn it into what you want. Because Africa, we have so many raw materials. Now, you can imagine, in 1980s, we had a government here which had so many institutions that were marketing raw materials. And for instance, you remember, we used to have coffee marketing board. Its role was not to process coffee, but to look for market to sell raw material. You can imagine. And it was a government-funded institution looking for market to sell raw material. And I don't know what that time, Mr. Ura and your friends in the 80s, were in which phase?
Which phase of the...
Phase 2 or phase 3? when Africa was marketing raw materials, and very cheaply. You can imagine having a whole institution paid by government to market your products very fresh from the gardens, and you sell them cheaply, but you don't have the capacity to stand into that fresh things and make it more.
But even right now, actually, they are selling you coffee as raw material.
Yes,
coffee.
And you say we have attained. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, I want these scholars to underline the word inclusiveness and exclusiveness. You guys, are you matching with other Ugandans? Are you speaking on behalf or from behalf? Because we want to know, who are you representing in that manner? They do not talk about the impact. How, if for instance I'm in Kanungu and you have a software or an app, how will the person from Kanungu benefit from your application? Because these are serious matters to talk about. Not just become an urban app dealer without considering in mind that we are Pan-Africans, we need to help others who are needed. Lastly, I think to me, if we want to move with the rest of the world, we must invest so much in training. Two, as my colleagues and the other professor, invest so much in research and innovation. Then lastly, we need to have affordable loans. Affordable loans.
Yeah.
You can have affordable loans from small banks.
As we spoke about the fourth industrial revolution, I may call it a fusion of advances in artificial intelligence, robotics, and the Internet of Things, 3D printing, genetic engineering, quantum computing, and other technologies, and blah blah. But me, I'll reach on point because we have few minutes. Africa innovators have become sellout to the white world. For example, me, I will be so open to you. If you come up in Uganda right now and you develop something, either an American company will take you and you'll be yearning for it. You will go to USA. Uganda will not benefit from you because there is, I may call it underfunding. My good friend there, a colleague, I may call him a youth. He is good at what he explains and everything. But if I ask him, how many times have the government come to you to engage you directly, not you going to them, but them coming to you, that how can we be on the same table and innovate? I believe it will be none. But it's you to go to them and tell them, you know, I can do this and this, and then you will line up in a queue of other applications to meet the Minister of Innovation or Science, who is a teacher, who is not a person who never even went to school to learn technology, is a Minister of Innovation and Science, waiting for a person who has knowledge about innovation and technology so that he can get a grant to innovate something. So the mode of governance that we are in this country of ours, for example, the topic was all about Uganda. It doesn't favor people who are innovators, because we are in an era whereby we have people in government who are more dealers, you know, who are opportunists. When they see someone who can do something, they will deal with other, you know, companies, Microsoft and other companies, so that they can export his knowledge. The government should, in Uganda we have a lot of young people who can innovate a lot of things. I've been in exhibitions and everywhere. But when these people are looked at, they are just picked up by other companies like the Microsoft and other people, and their knowledge is exported to the outside world. But if the government funds the innovators very well, we will find that we can have enough infrastructure for people who can innovate these things. Thank you so much. And our knowledge will stay here. As I submit lastly, I beg to submit by saying, we as Ugandans and the youth, we need to be looked into and not be with the dealers who can deal to sell the knowledge of our young brothers, but these people in government should come out with a good strategy of how to fund innovators and call them on the table and see how they can fund their technology.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Ask my young brother here, Uhuru here, because I've known him for a long time. If you could ask him how much has the government helped him to reach where he has reached now, he will tell you, my friend, I am struggling as a person. But if he had been in another country, like America, this man would be now a property of the state. Whatever innovation he would be having or trying to develop, the government would pick interest. And I'm sure his only taxing would be on innovation. not on who to sell to, where to get the money, you know. But right now you might find that he's doing it alone. He has to think of putting up that infrastructure, but also even look at how and where he's going to sell it. The money to buy the material and so on, it is his. So maybe that's the angle you wanted to bring this argument.
Ladies and gentlemen, we come to the end of tonight's show. See you again next Friday. But follow this show on tomorrow, Saturday, on NBS TV from 4 to 5. My name is Andrew Irumba Katsobe, your speaker, and I'm signing out here. Thank you. Omnani komoti,